Hey, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Hassan. I'm a growth trainer and a coach here at Growth Tribe. I'm usually based out of Amsterdam, but today I'm speaking from Lisbon, sunny Lisbon. But today we are talking about customer delight on digital platforms. Digital platforms have the power to delight, but they also have the power to frustrate. The digital customer experience can define not just product use, but also the potential to get organic growth through referrals, which is something that we talk about quite a lot in growth marketing. It can define a business success, but also its failure in this digital world. However, what we see is that brands, they really struggle to build user-centric digital platforms and also strategies. And it can be challenging to provide a platform that is fast, responsive, frictionless across all touch points in the customer journey, which is, again, something that we talk quite a lot here at Growth Tribe. So in today's fireside chat, I am excited to be joined by Henni Roini from HubSpot. And she's been responsible for new customer acquisition there for almost 3 years. And over the span of her career, she has firsthand experience of what it's like in the startup scene across Europe. Over the next hour, we're going to hear her insights on how to build an effective digital experience strategy and provide a cohesive and consistent experience that delights customers. Please ask your questions for Henni throughout, and we will keep some time towards the end to go over them. Please make sure that you post them in the Q&A section so that we don't miss out on those questions. And on that note, welcome, Henni. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
How is Ireland?
Ireland is not so sunny as over there, but hopefully we'll get some more sun soon over here too.
Fingers crossed. So tell us about what you do at HubSpot, maybe just a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marketing manager for HubSpot. I'm responsible for UKI demand, meaning campaigns, events, anything that really enables our sales team to hit their target. I do also work very closely with several European brands on marketing partnerships. And I've also been lucky enough to work with Growth Tribe in the past with a couple of projects. And also, fun fact, I did do one of the Growth Tribe crow hacking courses a few years back in Finland, which was definitely a great one. So I would definitely recommend that one.
Awesome, thanks. Let's talk about customer experience. I have quite a few questions that I want to ask you, and then maybe we can just take our conversation that way. Let's talk about the pandemic. Of course, we have to talk about COVID. We can't not talk about it. So how have customer expectations, in your view, changed as a result of the pandemic? And any of these behaviors do you see sticking for the next near future?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the world changed quite a bit in 2020. And with that, really customer expectations. And especially now that we see a bit of light at the end of this whole tunnel, we're really witnessing the heightened need for end-to-end experiences that are really simple and holistic and delightful. And the question that a lot of the customers are currently asking is, if a business was interacting and provided a great digital experience during the lockdown, why wouldn't they be able to maintain that experience when things actually get back to normal? So people are now used to doing everything online, and that's not going anywhere. So for today's consumers, being delighted isn't really an added value to their experience as your customer anymore. It's just a inner foundation, basically, that your relationship is built on. So consumers will react more to a moment of friction than to a moment of seamless performance. Like if you think about yourself when you're doing anything, if something is not working, you will notice it, but you don't necessarily notice the great experience as much. But if it's very delightful, you will probably tell your friends about it. So overall, with this whole acceleration of digitalization caused by the pandemic and basically like a consumerization of all these business tools, such as like Zoom, buyers are so independent and they expect way more intuitive experiences and are more just empowered to switch service if the experience isn't what they were hoping for. So basically anticipating your customer needs and then once across all the touch points and really being able to act upon all those needs is become like very essential. And this isn't going anywhere. So only those companies that really put the customers at the center of everything that they're doing and deliver that seamless experience will be able to survive in future.
Yeah, I like that point that you said that once you have a great experience, you want to tell other people about it as well. Why? Because it makes you look good. Because you suggested something that you were confident that the other person would have a good experience with as well. So when we talk about this experience, are there any fundamentals that you need to kind of account for in order to have like a seamless customer experience, especially on digital? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the most crucial thing to do is just to bring together your marketing, sales, and service teams under one team, and bring together a decision-making group that really owns that end-to-end customer experience. And this can be done simply by unifying the decision makers and creating a winning aspiration that is centered around the customers and not the business functions. So this will actually enable any business to move a lot faster and be a lot more customer centric. So for example, for HubSpot, our Chief Customer Officer, Yamini Rangan, has set the winning aspiration for us to be the #1 CRM for scaling businesses. And all of the strategies of all the customer facing teams stem from that specific aspiration. They of course have business specific strategies too, but we're starting from that winning aspiration. Also HubSpot, what we use, it's called this like flywheel approach, to really ensure that different business units are continually working together to help our customers. We use the flywheel approach as opposed to the funnel approach, which has previously kind of dominated the whole field and the customer experience. So in the funnel approach, different functions focus only on filling their part of the funnel before passing the customer on to somebody else. So for example, marketing does their part, and then they pass on the customer or the prospect to sales, and then when sales does the sale, they pass it on to the service team. But there is this very not creating a seamless experience. It's just like different functions kind of serving as functions, and it's very siloed. And then what that really means is the customer is really just left alone because you are not creating that seamless experience. So instead, with the flywheel approach, it really puts the customer at the heart of this continuous process to attract, engage, and delight customers, meaning that all those functions have the ongoing responsibility to support one another on fulfilling goals for the overall business. Also, like I said before, the flywheel approach really turns customers into promoters, because like when you are creating that delightful customer experience, you are more likely to have customers spread the word about your brand and promoting more growth through that. And obviously that is the best kind of promotion that you can get for your brand. And in my experience, this is one of the most effective ways of breaking down silos within the business. And as a business, you just need to think through each of those business functions like marketing, sales, service, and think about how can you remove friction from each of those processes so that your customer experience becomes more seamless, and you will have more customers recommending your business and driving that growth for you.
Yeah, I do want to zoom into this bit, but I will leave that in towards the end. But I want to talk about how you build personas and how you use those personas as well. But
Yeah.
before that, what I've seen HubSpot over the past few years is that you've really kind of moved away from a product-centric strategy to a customer-centric strategy, which is also something that you were talking about. So how would you suggest for businesses to be able to do that? Like, how do you take that starting point? And you do mention these different frameworks, but can you tell us how that transformation happened within HubSpot, if at all?
Yeah. So I don't think product centric and customer centric are really mutually exclusive. But today, especially for B2B SaaS products such as HubSpot, customers have at least 3 different expectations. So your product needs to be at least very easy to align. So your systems need to bring together all the customer facing people. So your tech should enable you to dynamically change marketing messages based on customer service interactions and stuff like that. It should be really easy to adapt. So making changes should be really easy. Those implementations should take minutes, hours, weeks, not months. And then finally, it should be really easy to adopt. So your software needs to be incredibly usable to drive that high adaptation. Because if customers don't love your system, they will not use it. So the user adaptation is also very key, and our customers really expect the systems that they use to be lovable almost. And especially when you talk about CRM systems, it's sometimes difficult, but that's definitely something that HubSpot is striving to be. So as a company, you should just always start making sure that your product is actually built to support your customers' expectations and go from there. And that's not something that HubSpot is doing all the time. And internally also, it's about shifting from this function out approach to a customer in approach. So something that I mentioned previously is just making sure that your business isn't like functions, it's about the customer. So a good way to tell if you operate on this function out kind of way is to, for example, ask your marketers, your salespeople, your service people what their goal is. And if your marketers say, oh, my goal is to, create or generate leads, your salespeople say, my goal is to generate deals, and so on. That is really a function out approach that optimizes results for that business unit, but not necessarily for the customer. So a customer in business starts with the customer needs and works backwards from there. So the shift to a customer in approach doesn't involve moving away from creating a fantastic product. It just means that you need to align your product team success with customer success. So what we do at HubSpot, for example, is that our product team owns the NPS metric. So they are getting direct feedback from customers every day, and they're literally measured on how happy our customers are.
Yeah. And being a customer of HubSpot myself, I can really tell just the CRM tool, it allows you and different teams to be really aligned on, what kind of deals are there in the pipeline. And but really, like, once you have a deal, like, what's the status of that particular thing? So for anybody who is interested in that, would highly recommend you to look at CRM systems like HubSpot, which has this 360-degree marketing approach that you can do, which really puts everything that you know about your customers in one place, which is pretty powerful. Safe to say, I'm quite a fan. Do you have any other examples that you have in mind of businesses that are doing really well within the customer experience space, and why are those names coming to your head?
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple of examples that come to mind. For example, for B2C companies, I would say Revolut. They're also a customer of HubSpot. They're one of my favorites. So they are a fintech unicorn that really puts customer experience on top of everything else, making it super easy and really intuitive for customers to interact with them. You can basically open a bank account in minutes with them. And if you have a question, you can just really quickly solve that within their live chat. And it really just seems that they're putting ease of use and speed on top of everything else. And then on the B2B space, Atlassian is another experience disruptor that I would really want to mention, because despite being a B2B company, they really treat their sales division as a B2C business almost, because in fact, they don't really even have a sales team, but they would just build this incredible freemium business model that was just based on like having an incredible product and having that growth really stem from there. So overall, what I would say is B2B businesses just need to understand that buyers are already armed with so much information about your product and your company. And they might already be, might have a free trial. They might be getting a feel of how your product is. And like, how would that solve for their pain points? And in these situations, the best way to get ahead isn't necessarily to force them to jump on a sales call with you. It might be to help them, get into the product and realize the value as quickly as possible. And your job is to just remove all that friction from the process, by telling them, like, what does your product cost? Like, how does it help them? Anticipating all their questions. And that's the way that you're actually going to make a sale in today's market, by anticipating all those needs and make it easy to buy your product and not harder. Because I feel like a lot of B2B products still out there are trying to make it just very, very hard to buy your product, and it shouldn't be that way. B2B should be getting closer to B2C and not further.
Yeah, there was a podcast that I heard once, and there was a very smart line in it which said, just because somebody is coming to you in a B2B capacity does not mean that they don't like a good customer experience. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense. For me, I think the names that come to my head, B2C would be Duolingo. Love Duolingo.
Mm,
Little things like the fact that once I'm not responding to the notifications, I get that notification that, oh, seems like you're busy right now. You can always turn back these notifications on at a later point in time. And for me, like that was that wow moment for me. B2B, I personally I'm following Stripe quite a lot, which is a payments platform. And they've really changed the game within that particular space as well. So that would be my top picks. Let's talk
completely
about
agree. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about marketing at HubSpot. And you did
Yep.
mention something about putting your customer in the center. Here at Growth Tribe, we talk a lot about building personas and just knowing like what is the job that you're doing for that particular persona, so that you can optimize around it and you can build your product around that as well. I want to understand from you about how are personas built and used in HubSpot, and how specific are your personas? Because I would imagine that you have a lot of different types. So how specific do you go, and where do you know that, okay, you know what, too much can't really manage this much specificity?
Yeah. Um, so basically for personas, HubSpot has obviously done a ton of research on this, on our core personas, and we always want to make sure that the starting point for all of our positioning and messaging and marketing are the challenges of our core buyer personas. We don't actually have that many buyer personas. I feel like people always assume that we have a ton, but we basically have one or two personas per hub, depending on the maturity of the product. So for example, for our sales and marketing personas, products, we have two personas. So in case of our marketing hub, we have one persona for more of a startup decision maker, and then we have one for more of a scale up decision maker. And as for all the companies that we run, our marketing is basically done on a monthly basis. So we always have a specific editorial theme per month. And with those campaigns, we are always targeting specific personas. And I would say that the most common segmentation is that startup scale up segmentation that I was talking about earlier, as that's where we really see the most difference between buyer persona challenges.
So help me understand. How what would be the main difference between, you know, how you approach a startup versus how you approach maybe a bigger scale up, or maybe even corporates, right? So how I would imagine is that a startup would want to test it out right away, while a corporate would probably want to go through like an entire round of opening up a tender and like trial and, you know, all of the steps that they want to. Is that how you guys approach it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously that is maybe even more related to the actual sales cycle that we go through. So for smaller companies, we have a very specific like retail motion. So if you are a smaller company, it's very easy for you to just buy HubSpot basically as an e-commerce solution. But if you're a larger company, you probably want to go through that full-on sales cycle, have a demo, talk with the person, go through that whole thing, and that's completely possible. So we try and make sure that whatever stage your company's at, we will, make sure that we serve you at the best possible way. And also regarding marketing, like I mentioned, I feel like those personas just have very different challenges. So when you are a startup company and you start your marketing function, obviously you have very different challenges than if you are a scale up and you need to scale your marketing. So when you think about your marketing overall, we try and make sure that all the content that we're producing, it's produced to a specific type of persona. So like I said, for startup personas, we try and produce more, not necessarily beginner, but just different type of content, because like it's all about like how do you build out your marketing strategy? How do you scale that? And then for a scale up, content might be something about how do you localize your marketing to different markets, stuff like that, rather than just having that, initial marketing strategy conversation with them.
Yeah. A lot of times, like when I'm talking to people over here, what I see is that they spend a lot of time and maybe a workshop in building up a persona, and it ends up being just something that's lying around in one of their slide decks, and they never really go back to it. What would your advice be to those people on how they can make their personas more actionable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could start by saying that I'm in a very fortunate situation where my profile is actually one of the key personas that we're targeting, which obviously makes it a whole lot easier to really understand the key struggles, in addition to the fact that I also use our product every day, as all of our marketing uses HubSpot to market. But as a company with multiple hubs, we of course also have other buyer personas that I and everybody at HubSpot needs to understand. But I think the key overall is just to being really close to your customers. And we have a few things that we do to make sure that everything in marketing really understands our customers. So the first thing that we just started doing this year actually is these day in the life interviews. So every month before we go over the new product features or launches as a company, we have this session with the global HubSpot marketing team where we interview a customer on what their role entails and how they use HubSpot. And it's always a great opportunity for us to really understand what our customers go through every day and how they actually use HubSpot. So having those kind of interviews for the whole marketing team or for the whole company, because we basically always have a customer interview in our company meetings too, are a great way to make sure that people actually understand the customer struggles. Second thing I would say is sales call recordings. So our sales team uses Gong to record all the sales calls they're making. So as marketers, we also have an opportunity to listen to those calls and really hear what are the things that our prospects really care about. And honestly, those might be some of the most valuable minutes that I've ever spent. I think like every marketer should always be on those sales calls and listen to the actual conversations that are being had, because those are just gold for messaging and positioning overall. And the last thing that I would say is related to our campaigns. So as I said, our campaigns are run on a monthly basis with a specific theme. And before each of these campaigns, our product marketing team actually runs these sessions where we brainstorm on the positioning of those campaigns. And those sessions always begin with customer insights. And also, as the positioning is final for those campaigns, we also get a lot of extra resources from that team in regards to how the positioning and the product features actually relate to our customers. So everything about those campaigns is always tied back into customers and our personas. And I think what really helps with that is we always have real customer quotes. It's not just that we're saying like, okay, our persona XYZ, we're saying this real customer needs this because of XYZ. So always, overall, HubSpot just always wants to solve for the customer. And I think that is the key on making those personas really actionable.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I find this really interesting because user research is something that is literally my like the reason why I made that shift from traditional marketing into growth, because I like that a key difference. And I want to understand this, how it happens on ground. So how do you find these customers and how do you get in touch with them and how do you pitch that conversation, a day in the life of a customer, to that particular customer? That's something like a lot of people say that you go out and you talk to your customers, but how do you find them?
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, we use HubSpot. So we go through our CRM and we look at customers with specific profiles. So we always have customers who use those specific products that we have campaigns for. But basically, I mean, we go through their customer success person. So we just basically talk to all of the reps and be like, okay, who would be a suitable customer for this? Luckily, we're in a situation where most of our customers really love us, so they are happy to do it. So it hasn't been a struggle for us at all, really, to find those customers. Usually people are really happy to talk to the marketing team because usually they just have a lot of insights and things that they also want to improve on. So if they can have that direct conversation with the company, I think it's also a win-win situation for both of the customer and HubSpot. So Yeah, like I said, we haven't really had any trouble doing that, at least for now.
Yeah. Oh, that's a happy situation to be in, for sure. Um, let's talk about your customer journey, because I would imagine how long do you think it takes for a customer to go through entire sales cycle in HubSpot? And let's talk about one particular persona.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it really depends.
Yeah.
Obviously. I mean, it's basically from, a 1 day to 3 months, depending on what type of customer it is. I would say that the regular HubSpot customer is probably anywhere from 1 to 2 months. If you think about that, like scaling company, who maybe, starts a trial or like goes through a trial, and then that's the sales cycle. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a longer sales cycle, but not necessarily, a full-on enterprise sales cycle that would last like years or anything like that.
And let's talk about the longer sales cycle, right?
Mm,
How do you deliver consistent digital experiences throughout this entire long sales cycle? And I also want you to talk about it from a marketing point of view. So before somebody becomes a customer, or before somebody even hears about HubSpot, like how do you deliver those marketing digital consistent experiences as well?
yeah. So I would say that the key is really to be just internally very aligned. So everybody in the customer facing teams need to work together towards the same goal, and everybody needs to have access to the same information. Because if your marketing, sales, and service teams all use different systems and they all have access to different data, you can't really expect that to result in a delightful external customer experience. Like I mentioned, our marketing and sales teams all work in HubSpot, which makes it really easy for us to align on everything and to make sure that, for example, our marketing automation is consistent with the current status of that prospect. Because we have the same properties, we like everything is the same. So it's really easy for us as a marketing team to do everything we can to push that prospect forward, in the flywheel. And also other thing that I mentioned is revenue operations, and I really mean revenue operations, which is all the operations within marketing, sales, and service teams. So I know for some companies, you might only have like one operation person, or then you have one for each kind of function. But for us, we have revenue operations kind of serving all of these different business functions, that is, around the customer again. Um, and with this, the revenue operations team really has a really crucial role in making sure that all the underlying data that is within the CRM really stays clean, and that the teams have that correct permissioning to get access to that same data. And this is really something that all companies should really pay attention to from the beginning. How can you really make sure that you collect data systematically and keep it clean? Because it is way too easy to just kind of forget that. And then when you're scaling, you find yourself with a really bloated CRM. And that data is probably the most valuable data that you have as a business. So you should really make sure that your customer facing teams can fully utilize it, to really enable that great customer experience. So like I said, even for marketing, like if we don't have that data and the data isn't clean, we can't do anything. We can't
Yeah.
scale that experience. So operations is one of the most important things that people don't usually even think about. And not a lot of companies have operations people, or it's part of somebody's role. And you can't really expect that to be prioritized if that's the case. Um, so I would just suggest, be kind to your operations people and hire them, because that's the basis for everything.
Yeah. I see this so much around me as well. Like people have CRM systems and they have like a lot of like contacts in it as well, but the data is not reliable because it hasn't been updated or it hasn't been cleaned properly. Um, I think even at Growth Tribe, like we went through this entire exercise of like 4 or 5 months of just going, like that was a separate project on its own where we wanted to just clean up everything that we have so that we can start making decisions based on whatever that you see over there. So definitely a great point for bringing that up. Any resources that you can point us to when somebody is in this situation and they want to clean it up? How? could they do that? And I'm asking this from you because I know HubSpot has so many resources lying around.
Yeah, I mean, if you Google any of that and add HubSpot, I think there's going to be a lot of resources on there. And obviously, it very much depends on like what systems you're using. Because if you have a ton of integrations, all your teams are in separate systems, it's going to be a big project. But if you have like a foundational CRM and then you have a few integrations over there, it's going to be a lot easier to clean up your data. And there are also possibilities for you. So, like me, if you would use, if you're a HubSpot customer or a future HubSpot customer, you can, for example, use our operations hub to clean up some of that data. So we, for example, have workflows where you can automatically, change the first letter of somebody's first name to capital first letter, stuff like that, small stuff like that you kind of need to do to make your experience personalized, but takes a ton of time to do. But we've automated a lot of this with our operations hub. And so it just really depends what type of system you use and if they have that type of function.
Cool, thanks for that. Let's talk experimentation. And this is something that we talk about a lot in Growth Tribe, about running not just quantity, but quality of experiments as well. How do you, within marketing at HubSpot, how do you approach experimentation? And how do you get ideas for things that you want to try out?
Yeah, so obviously we definitely always wanna do a lot of experiments, and we want to make sure that we're consistent with that approach. I feel that usually the problem is that you have so much that you want to test, but only so much resources to actually execute them, rather than getting ideas. But there are a few ways that always makes me get new ideas. So first of all, the customer calls that I already mentioned. I think every time when I listen to a customer call, that always brings up a whole lot of new ideas, especially regarding messaging. But then the second thing that I would say is just to look at what your competitors are doing. Obviously, you don't want to be just like copying everything what your competitors are doing, but you don't also want like not be looking at them. So I would definitely recommend just looking at your competitors, testing some of those things that they're doing. And then finally also just following obviously industry trends pages. I, for example, read growth hackers a lot for inspiration on different experiments. Also for email marketing, I look at this site called Really Good Emails. That is great. You can get a lot of inspiration from there. And I think when you have those ideas, the most important thing is to have just a clear process with the experiments. And when you have the ideas, just rank them based on the highest impact. So, I mean, there's obviously so many frameworks that you can use for this, like, ICE or anything like that. And then you can see which are the most high impact ones and go from there. But I think the most important thing is just to have a clear process for it, because if you just kind of like run endless A/B tests and don't really have a process for it, don't really have next steps for any of it, it doesn't get you anywhere. You need to be very consistent with the experimentation overall.
Yeah. And are all of these ideas coming from just one head, or how do you make sure that everybody is kind of thinking about those ideas and then putting them in regularly as well?
Yeah, so I think it all comes into the team alignment overall. We have an internal wiki that we share a lot of stuff. We also have these sessions where all of the marketing teams goes through marketing experiments. So we have a monthly for that. So they, for example, go through like some of the most successful experiments that they've done. So there are a lot of those kind of things that we do as a whole in the marketing team, and also all of the different teams have their own processes too for this. So I think it depends on the team level. But overall, as a company, we always try and make sure that we always share those successful and sometimes also unsuccessful experiments, so that everybody knows what's happening in there.
What experimentation framework, if any, do you use within HubSpot? And is it just the marketing team that's doing these experiments, or do you do these experiments with the customer success and the product and different teams out there as well?
Yeah, I think, well, it depends what the experimentation is. So for example, if we do an experimentation with our retail play, for example, that usually always involves, product, legal, all that kind of different kind of functions and teams, because it needs to be cross functional. But if it's something very marketing specific, it might be just the marketing team. It obviously really depends. But overall, the framework that we use is to always start with the goal. So what is the goal of the specific experiment? So we want to make sure that there is a very specific metric that we're measuring, and who is the goal for, and like what is the actual experiment. Then we have a hypothesis that we believe what will happen because of XYZ that we've seen happen. And then we have our prediction of what will happen on that. And then we actually have the experiment design. So we have the control group, and then we have the variant. So we have the, how would things be if we would continue in this normal fashion? And then what is the variant that we're measuring? And then after we've run all those experiments with the control and the variant, we analyze the results, and then we do key takeaways and next steps. So that is the framework that we use with all of these experiments, and really allows us to make sure that we're consistent with the approach. And we always have those next steps, so that when we see successful experiments, we can scale those, and then maybe not do those unsuccessfuls anymore, but learn from them and maybe get new ideas from those again. Because usually if something is not successful, you usually think, oh, but something else might be successful, so you get more ideas out of it. But yeah, that has been pretty successful framework for us.
Yeah, I really like that that you mentioned, because we keep talking about running a lot of experiments, and once you get into that rhythm where you are running these experiments, even if you figure out, like, even if you have inconclusive results, it gives you ideas for your future experiments, because you want to try something different, right? So just getting that rhythm going is something that's really powerful, but only after. But a lot of times what I see is that companies or employees, they kind of give up after that initial, like the first few experiments that you're doing, and you don't get any concrete results, and then you give up, and that engine never really starts, which is quite a shame when it comes to that. There is a question here, and I think since we are talking about experimentation, I'm not sure what it means, but it says, how does HubSpot enable experimentation for their employees?
I mean, first of all, I think just having that framework is a great starting point. So if you're thinking about how to enable this in your organization, I think the first thing that you need to provide is that framework. Because if you don't have a process for all the employees, it's very hard for you to make that happen. So that's what I would start with. And then obviously having a lot of training around it, and then making sure that the company really supports even failing. We always say, like, we're not, that small of a company anymore. I feel like in the beginning it was more of that, a bit more, fail fast type of thing. But we still try and do that. And we want to make sure that the company overall supports experimentation, and that comes from leadership. So leadership should never say, like, oh yeah, we don't support this because we see that something is failing. No, you learn from that and then you go forward. So I think, having that leadership support, having that framework, and then having that education with them, you're off to a great start. And those are all the things that HubSpot does, what has made it so successful for us to be doing experimentation at scale.
Yeah. I loved all of your points, because here at Growth Tribe, we talk about three things as well. Number one is your growth mindset, which is the learning aspect that you were talking about, like always be learning, trying out different things, so that, because every experiment you're doing, it requires a certain skill set that you may not have today, right? And a lot of times, like, people don't go out there and try out different things because that hesitance of trying something new is missing. Point number two, we talk about embracing failure, which is something that you also talked about. But the third one is something called psychological safety, which is being able to go out there and ask questions and without being scared to come across as incompetent or intrusive or whatever, because that's a reason why people don't really go out there and ask a lot of questions. So that just that without being shamed, I guess, and having that space to go out there, and that's something that is really important as well. Um, there is another question, although we're not there in the Q&A bit, but I think we're on that topic, so let's get that covered as well. So Jonathan, he's asking, can you give an example of an experiment that did not work at all for B2B?
That is a great question. That did not work at all. At all.
Yeah.
Can we get back to that? Nothing really comes to mind right now that didn't really. I feel like you can always learn something, and always some parts of it work, but nothing really comes to mind that didn't work at all.
Yeah. And specifically for B2B, but I also think about this, and we will come to this question in a bit. One question. So when it comes to experimenting with personalized experiences, um, how do you test messages through the funnel? So, and there are other questions over here in the Q&A about message testing as well. So how would you go about testing your messages through the funnel?
Obviously we do a ton of A/B testing. Overall, we do that across, especially email marketing, because we do a lot of automation. Overall, we have a very strong automation engine with our email, and we basically A/B test everything. We test everything in workflows. So as we use HubSpot, you can see the conversion rates and everything through the well, not the funnel, but the flywheel. In the workflow, so we test everything over there. So mostly we just rely on the data. Like that's the best possible indication that you can have. So what are the conversion rates within each email, for example, or chat, whatever the channel is. So that's just the key thing that we do. But then obviously also just talking to those customers again, like that is a thing that we do too. But yeah, I would just say like overall within marketing, we just look at those metrics and conversion rates, because that's really the best thing that you can do.
Yeah. Are there other metrics that you also look at when you're looking at customer feedback? So I'll give you an example. So when we talk about, when you just launch a product, I always tell companies that I'm coaching is that your most important metric should be the number of customers you're talking to in a week or in a month, right? So are there any interesting metrics that you have come across that emphasize the need to go out there and ask for customer feedback?
Well, we just use NPS as the North Star for everything. And I think that is, one of the key things that you should be using, or some type of similar metric that really just uses customer satisfaction. I think it is a bit different for startup companies. So like you said, like when you're launching a product, like it's a different type of thing. Whereas like for us as a more of a scaled up company, we want to just do net promoter score or something that really measures customer satisfaction overall. But if you are a startup, you want to go and talk to as many customers in the beginning, and that should definitely be a key metric that you measure. But it really depends on the scale of your company.
Yeah. Could you give some tool recommendations for customer research? That's a question by Anna G.
Yeah. So I mean, for example, SurveyMonkey, I think is a great one. So just by doing surveys over there, we've used SurveyMonkey at HubSpot. Then also, I mean, we also have some tools at HubSpot depending on what your initial tools or expectations are. But I would definitely recommend SurveyMonkey. They have some great tools for marketers. as all the other customer facing teams.
We talk a lot about Usability Hub, and we find that really powerful, and especially because like you can recruit people off of this same platform only as well, because a lot of times like people have that hesitance, right? That, yes, I can put together a survey, but I don't know who to send it out to. So that's something that we can do as well. I would recommend try my UI. So especially if you have a digital product, or if you've got a website which has a longer kind of online journey, like a lot of steps that you can do online. So try my UI is a really powerful tool that you can use to articulate your customers' thoughts of what goes on in their heads when they are taking certain actions on your website as well. There's another one that, sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, on Usability Hub, which tactics do you usually use? Do you use the 5-second thing, or which do you use?
So we have a few, like there are a few tests over there. 5-second test is one of the tests that it's a go-to thing for us. I do a 5-second test on everything. I do a 5-second test on an email that is going out. I do a 5-second test on search ads that I'm creating. I do a 5-second test on landing pages. The other day I did a 5-second test on a job description that we had put together. It wasn't a 5-second test, it was a 20-second test, because we wanted to give people enough time to read over it. But then you can do a preference test over there as well, where you ask people which one do you prefer, and more importantly, why. You can do a click test, which is where would you click first. You can do a questions test, which is the one that I was talking about, almost like a survey. And then you can also do a design test, which is really powerful because you can upload videos, audios, and show it to people and ask them for what they think about whatever collateral that you've kind of put out there. So quite a few tests over there. Another tool that's coming to my head, it's by the founder of CXL. It's called winter.io. And that's become really powerful, especially within the B2B space as well. If you want to message test your website, especially with B2B audiences. So you can select who you want over there: marketing managers, do you want finance people, do you want technology people? So they have like all of these different people on their panel, which is really powerful as well. I have another question over here by Jonathan, and is UX important for you at HubSpot? And I'm going to add to that. How big is your UX team, and how close do you work with them?
That is a great question. I do not know the exact size of that team. It is very big. I don't work directly with that team, but overall, it is something that is very close to everybody at HubSpot. We care about user experience a lot. And overall, when we think about product design, all of our hubs are built from these 5 primary colors, what we call them. So there are like 5 bases of our product, and all of our hubs have some portion of these primary colors. So what that really means is that all of our products have the same user experience. And that is the key to everything. And we try and replicate that even with our marketing efforts. So we try and make sure that the experience is very seamless over there, but especially with product design, by building our product with these primary colors has made it certain that our user experience is very consistent across all hubs, across all buyer personas. So that has really been the key for us. But to be honest, though, I don't really work that much with our specific UX team.
All right. I really like this question, which is, would you say that B2B needs more touch points than B2C throughout the funnel?
That is a great question. I would say not necessarily, honestly, because it just all depends on at what stage the buyer is at. So if the buyer is ready to buy, you don't necessarily need any more touch points. But I think usually what B2B does is it kind of thinks that all the customers need to go through this whole funnel or flow before before they can actually become customers. And that's obviously not the case. You need to make sure that you know where customers are in that buyer's journey so that you can serve them that specific message. And like I said about the retail motion before, if you are a startup that is looking for a specific solution, it's like, okay, they figure out that HubSpot is a great solution for them. We want to make sure that they can actually buy straight away with like they know what the price is, they know what the product entails, they can start a free trial, they can buy the product. We want to make it as easy as possible. So yeah, to answer your question, no, I don't think so. It's just all about making sure that at what stage your customers are at.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on the product itself, right? How difficult is it to understand the value of the product? So we call it friction to value here at Growth Tribe. So if, for instance, for Growth Tribe, we would consider ourselves both a B2B and a B2C company. But what it takes a couple of touch points before people can truly understand the value proposition of Growth Tribe for them and the difference that we can make in their lives. So yeah, I think it's more to do with what your product is. We do have, what is the last marketing channel that HubSpot tried to use in terms of promotion?
The last, I mean, we use a lot of channels. I mean, I'm not sure what is actually meant by the last marketing channel. If you want to specify that in the chat, I can maybe answer better. But overall, we use a variety of channels. We obviously use like email, social. We do podcasts, like all the different social networks. We do co-marketing, like that's obviously a big channel for us. What else? I mean, I would say like if there's a channel, like we will use it. We are pretty good at utilizing all the different channels. But I would say like internally, our strongest channels are probably like our own like email contact database, our social database. We have a very strong following. We have strong following across all of our social channels, like YouTube. We have Clubhouse chats, all that kind of stuff too. But especially YouTube is pretty strong for us. All of our podcasts, we have a podcast network. Yeah, a variety of channels, I would say.
Yeah, I'm guessing Clubhouse could be the last channel that you could have used, the latest, I guess, because
when you think about like that, Clubhouse is probably one of the latest ones, and I guess you could say that the podcast network actually is like the latest one, really, because that's something that we just launched a few weeks back. So that's basically a collection of all these different entrepreneurial business podcasts that we support and we collaborate with. So I think that is probably our latest channel, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think that has anything, because I'm seeing podcasts like popping up quite a lot around us as well. Do you think that has anything to do with COVID and just people at home and they have kind of time? And we see that a lot of people are also investing in themselves using, this time that they have at home. What would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, I think podcasts were becoming a thing even before COVID, but COVID probably accelerated that transformation quite a bit. If I just think about myself, if I go outside, because like now you literally need to go outside for walks because you are not going to the office anymore or doing anything, you need something to do. I think one thing though is that people are not commuting anymore that much, whereas I felt like people, when they were commuting, you would always listen to a podcast, whereas like now you're not doing that. So I don't know, but I think people have more time to do learning and more time to just invest in your own learning. I think that has had an impact on the rise of podcasts overall. And I feel like everything just goes in waves almost, it was like radio, then like other type of channels again, and like now it's just like back to that voice type of thing again with podcasts and everything. So yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, I would imagine that you're home and you're stuck with your partners and you want some time away. So you're just like, okay, this is my space. So that could be it.
Yeah.
Let's take one last question. And do you want to propose a book for somebody who's just started a growth career, a career in growth? What's your favorite book within the growth space?
I mean, you can always go to that like lean startup kind of vibe. I would say like those are one of the core ones. But I know Growth Tribe has so many book lists, so you probably have like a ready list somewhere that you could share. Because I remember having a great list from you guys when I went to that course.
Yeah. Yes, Lean Analytics for sure is a top book that I can think about. And it's a very easy to read book. Like it sounds pretty dry, Lean Analytics, but like it's a very easy to read book. So would definitely recommend that to everybody. I have one last question that Jonathan has just asked, and he's saying, thinking of the podcast question, what about digital events like this one?
As
Like
a
webinars,
channel.
as a channel.
Yeah, so we obviously shifted all of our events to digital. So we just had our biggest event in Europe that I was organizing for Europe. So we've seen a ton of success with that. And honestly, I think for the future, our events will probably be some type of hybrid combination of in-person and online. Just because you can obviously just touch so much more people with online events, you know. Obviously the challenge is always like how to keep people engaged and how to make that experience better. But overall, I think like online events are here to stay. Because if you, for example, think about like how many people can you, like for us, if we think about UK as a market, like my market, how many people can I reach, like, you know, in London with one event, rather than, you know, if I just run a digital event from my house.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Obviously there will always be value with like one-on-one communication, and we will, you know, do them when that's possible. But I think online events are here to stay, and we've seen massive value with that also because it's way easier to track people's journeys with that. So again, you know, that data comes into effect. So for example, for my job, you know, I want to make sure that as many people as possible become qualified leads. It's very hard, or harder for me to do that with like in-person events. Whereas like with online events, I can do triggers, I can do testing, I can make sure that I get as many people as possible through the sales, rather than like, whereas like with in-person, it's a lot more challenging. So everything digital, it always has that data component, which makes things a lot easier.
Yeah. We have that one question that we wanted to answer towards the end, but I think I'm going to change that question a little bit. I'm going to take the liberty to do that. So the question was, can you give an example of an experiment that did not work? Let's talk about an experiment that did work for B2B. And I have something in mind. Maybe I'll go over mine, and then till then you can think about what you want to say.
Well,
But I was
actually,
oh, yeah.
yeah, sorry. I was actually thinking about this, and something that did not work for us at all is media partnerships. We tried that for a long time, and we tried to make it work, but we just could not see any results from that. And especially in the B2B space, I feel like it's very popular for people to do that. And we really tried that, and we just did not see the results. I don't know. I feel like a lot of media companies are trying to make it work, but we just could not see any results or interaction with that because they're selling to a lot of different companies that like their audience. But obviously that audience is not, you know, familiar with those brands. So it is very hard for like external media companies to sell your brand. So what we are doing instead is like building our own media company. Like that's what we're doing as a company. For example, we purchased The Hustle, which is this company that, for example, has this newsletter that is wildly popular, has millions of subscribers. So yeah, we're focusing on building our own media instead of having, you know, external medias, you know, promote for us. So I think that's on a larger scale, that's something that has been, you know, a fail in the past, but we learned from it. So maybe you can go over like a very successful experiment then.
I think there you go. I think you've answered it pretty much. And we are also out of time. Thanks so much for being here, and especially on a Monday afternoon. I can understand like today must have been a really busy day. It was great hearing from you. We are going to leave a link in the chat. So for those who are listening, we would love some feedback, and we use that to further improve our events. So my colleague from the events team is going to post the link, and it is already there. Would really appreciate your feedback. And once again, thanks so much, Henni. Have a great rest of the day, and see you soon.
Thank you all.